Welcome back to Hemp Forward. We're talking about the right tools, nuts and bolts of modern hemp farming, and joining me is Casey Brooks once again with high-grade hemp seed. Casey, you know, as we make this transition again, farmers have questions not only about how to plant this crop, but the equipment they're going to need. So let's start from the beginning of the season. When I'm planting, what am I looking at? Can I use something I might already have on the farm?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you know, you want to do your field prep first, but once you get to planting time, you can go with a air planter, you know, as high as 8, 10, 12 row air planter, one person, one tractor. That's all you need. Precision air planter, putting that seed, direct sowing it right into the ground. One way to keep your labor costs really low. If you're on plastic mulch bedding like this field that we're in right now, you're going to want to go to the field with the live plants. And usually we're having those start out in the greenhouse in a 50 cell, 72 cell flat, but you're then going to use like a water wheel transplanter.
So the way that I want to put the seeds in the ground or the plants in the ground, is that dictating for my end user or what I'm going to use with that crop? What's going to make the decision on how I'm putting the crop in the ground, in other words?
Yeah, great question. It's not necessarily on the end user or buyer per se, but it's what that farmer has available to him to use.
So do you think that one planting method over the other necessarily is better as far as yield or the type of crop, or how are farmers making that decision other than just what they have on their operation?
Sure. You know, on a boutique side of a hemp farm, you're going to see a lot more like raised plastic bedding. Again, that's just, in our experience, that's going to give a better quality product. But when you start attacking these hundreds, thousands of acre fields, that's when you're going to go to a mechanical air planter.
What about anything of row spacing, seed spacing, those types of things? Is that convert over from what I may have learned in corn and soybean, wheat type of farming?
Absolutely will. A big thing there is timing, when you're looking to go to the field, geographically related, depending where you're at. But typically, if you're going to direct sow that seed, guys will get in into May, beginning of June, and then you're looking for 1st of October into September harvest.
So behind us is a combine. A lot of guys will have a combine. So walk me through the harvest then. We see a combine, we think, okay, maybe it's a lot the same, and perhaps some parts are, but some parts are probably totally different.
Yeah, no, at that point, when you get to the point to harvest, you're going to need to, for one, dry your crop. Because if you are going to be using a combine like this or silage chopper, you got to get that moisture content just right. If it's too wet, it's going to gum up the machinery, break you down, you're stopped. So you're going to want to come in here, windrow it, sloth, sickle bar. Guys will come out here even with loppers or weed eaters. Is what you're trying to do is get it field dried for 3 to 5 days, then you can run it through the combine.
I'm guessing that 3 to 5 days is really important, because if you get one way or the other, you're probably going to have problems, correct?
Yeah, exactly. If you just let it sit out there for weeks on end, your stuff is going to essentially just erode, almost turn to dust, if you will, especially if you're going to run it through a combine. All that valuable cannabinoids is just going to lift off and go into the air it goes. So it's a fine balance. Again, if you try to do it too early, you're going to have a tough time getting it through your harvest equipment, gumming it up.
So as I think about harvest method, is the end use of the product then dictate what harvest method I can use?
It kind of does. If you're trying to go for oil, you're going to want to take a reasonable, careful approach. If you're in an industrial field to where you're not going for cannabinoid content and you're going for seed, fiber, or herd, then it could be a little bit more aggressive. But if you're again going for that oil, you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to preserve those terpenes, cannabinoids, so you can fetch a higher dollar.
So once I've harvested this product, we think about storage being very important. So what's that like when I'm growing hemp? Is storage another thing that I have to consider?
Storage is huge. You want to get this product off the field in a timely manner, and you do want to get it into a barn, warehouse, whatever that may be. A lot of guys, farmers, are going to already have their contracts in place with labs, and usually the labs can take it in from there, right from the field. That's your best case scenario. You want to try to team up with a local lab that typically they're going to do a split with you, a rev split, and at that point it's in their facility, and they're now on to the point of refining it into oil.
Some producers I know aren't using a combine. Is that because it's smaller acreage, or they're growing for a specific product?
It's most likely smaller acreage for sure.
Okay, and in those cases, are we hand drying the crop usually?
Yeah, you know, some guys, if you're 50, more so like 10 acres or less, guys will have their barn drying space available to where they can put it in and keep it indoors to maximize their dollar that way.
To me, it looks like drying tobacco is kind of what it looks like.
Very similar, absolutely.
So what other things do I need to think about from the equipment end if I'm going to make the transition then?
Again, you know, talking with those labs, you kind of want to have what's your end goal. You know, if you are cannabinoid farming, you want to try to team up with someone that you're going to extract that and in turn turn it into money. So you want to develop those relationships for sure.
So we've talked about that I may have to make some modifications to existing equipment I have, but do you see down the road that we will develop new equipment that is specially made for hemp farming?
I do, and I think it's guys like John Deere. You know, they're starting to finally get involved. It's going to take some R&D working with them to try to get better equipment, but we're just at the forefront right now for sure.
So we've talked a little bit about modifications to equipment, but are there some things that you wish equipment would do now that it just doesn't do?
Definitely, and again, there's going to be some R&D going on to help bring that to fruition, but one of the things I see is that when a farmer's wanting to go with a smokable hemp product, that's a very hands-on labor-esque. You're going to want something that can help with the bucking and the stripping of the flower and doing it in a delicate way to where we're not affecting the look and presence or the terpene or cannabinoid ratio involved in it.
Well, you know, we think about speed in a lot of crops, but is this a crop where slow counts for me right now?
Yeah, and just touching on that, you know, bucking and stripping of the material, you don't want to be too aggressive. You're going to hurt the product, so to speak. So there is a fine balance to where you do want to take your time and preserve the look and the cannabinoids, the terpenes, all the parts of it.
For those that are thinking about growing the crop for fiber, what about equipment for that?
Sure, and that's something, you know, right now the craze is all about CBD and CBN, CBG, different cannabinoids, but you know, once we start really attacking the scene, those 10,000 plus acres, and you are using industrial hemp seed, you're going for the seed, fiber, and herd. I think we are gonna see here, especially in North America, decortication machine set up to get that bast and fiber out and stripped away from the stalk. And at that point, you're utilizing the whole plant, and it's not just the cannabinoids we're looking for.
And you think that's where we're headed very soon then?
I do, yep.
Good. Thank you, Casey. Good discussion about the equipment. Next, we're going to go to Corbett Hefner with Formation Ag as he talks about what his company is doing to prepare the equipment for the hemp industry.
Hand harvesting, of course, can be quite costly with the number of labor that you have to put into the field. It's just a kind of a cost prohibitive problem at the moment, especially depending on where today's CBD prices are. That putting large dollars in labor in the field is just really difficult. That's where mechanical, gentle solutions for harvesting CBD seed fiber are definitely going to start to play a bigger and bigger role as things progress here. You know, you can get custom harvesting done for between $300, $500 per acre. We've got machinery in the field that's on custom harvest crews that is doing the actual stripping of the crops and saving people all of that post shucking and bucking. So there's things like that that can definitely help reduce the cost of that harvesting. But you know, it depends on your end market. Everything depends on what you're selling. If you're selling high-end smokable or more medical type grade CBD products, then some of these mechanical harvest solutions just may not be the right thing for you. So it just depends really on what your end market is. If you're going for more of a commodity grade or larger volume, larger commodity type products, then you know, mechanical harvesting definitely is a fit. Just have to know and understand your end use and what you want to do with it. End goal is everything. You know, what equipment do you own? What do you want to do with your crop? You know, we try to build implements that go on existing power units, existing tractors, swathers, or combines. We make these machines so that they don't damage the trichomes. That, you know, if you've got a dual purpose crop, grain and CBD, grain and fiber, we can harvest those kind of things too. The machinery's really come along in the last 5 years. So it's getting much easier to handle these issues. Farmers need to make some money to be profitable so that we can all afford to eat. So we've taken the stance that our harvesting equipment, we've built everything based around existing power units that farms have. So whether it's tractors or swathers, we build an implement that goes onto that machine. So like a 16-foot clean strip harvester sells for about $76,000, $78,000. Clean cut machines, depending on which size it is, can go between $60,000 and $80,000. So they're an implement. The ROI on those machines is usually less than a harvest season or around a harvest season, depending on your acreage. We want farms to make money. We need the farms to make money and be viable. So we've chosen to make all these machines as an implement, use the existing power source you have, and then you quick change that machine off and get your tractor back to tillage work or your swather back to doing hay, whatever your main the rotation crops are. But we really believe that it has to be a low-cost entry thing to get these farms going and to make people successful. It doesn't do any good to plant a hemp crop and not be able to monetize it or actually make a profit on it. So we spend a lot of time trying to help our farmers understand the business and understand how that there's a chance that they can make some money off this, and everything hinges off of their farming technique, their harvest technique. We tell them everything starts with a sale. Make sure you try to get your crop sold before you put it in the ground, and always understand you only plant what you can afford to plow in. What is your risk tolerance? If you have a small disposable income that you're willing to risk, that's about as much as you want to risk. If you go too high and put in too money into it, you can get your farm in financial trouble. So you want to be cognizant of that. This is our 5th harvest. Formation Ag's been in business making equipment since 2015. This is our actually 5th harvest season. We've made great strides in mechanically harvesting crops. Our machinery's covered thousands of acres. I'm standing in a field here. This farmer last year planted 3,500 acres of CBD, sold everything standing on the stalk except for about 600 acres. That 600 acres they harvested with 2 people in the field. So we've got equipment that'll run between 2 acres an hour up to 10 acres an hour, harvesting and stripping, whether it's whole plant, clean strip machine that's stripping the buds, or we have another machine called the super clean cut that can partially strip and then cut the rest of it. It all depends on how you farmed your crop, what your end use is, what your goals are for the material, what you want to do with it. But we've got 3 different harvesting solutions. There's some other equipment out there, not super familiar with it, but there's a lot of techniques. One of the questions on here is can you adapt existing machinery? We like people to use what they have. Direct seeding, grain drills, corn planters, your soybean machinery, all of those things you can plant, you can cultivate with those machines as well. When it comes to harvesting, it's a little bit different. You see people wanting to modify combines. 5 years ago, we tried to combine and decided we had between 50 and 90% loss in the trichome and the CBD content yield of these harvested crops, and it just didn't work all that hot. That was where we came up with the clean cut machine, which is a whole plant harvester. If you're growing more bush type Christmas tree looking plants, then that's a good option for you, for hang drying. Then we came up as things progressed, row spacing got tighter. Then we've got up to the clean strip machine. Like if you see this bud here, this machine will come through, grab this bud and just take all of that off, put it in the trailer without destroying the trichomes. And then we've got the super clean cut machine that'll strip part of these lower, bigger, bushier type plants growing on furrows or dedicated row spacing. That's a good option there. But modifying machinery, hay machinery threshes pretty hard, combines thresh pretty hard. Chopping doesn't seem to work too good. You can do it, but it depends on if you're willing to accept the losses that come along with that. Because the trichomes are growing on the outside of the plant. If you rupture those or impact those, you can break them, and then they start to dry out and flash off. So you start losing your lowest Valdo compounds sooner. If you use techniques, direct seeding techniques, your planting equipment, your cultivation equipment, all of those things can be utilized and help reduce your cost to start hemp farming or continue hemp farming. It's the argument horticultural style versus agricultural style. Horticulture being a little more hand labor, or a lot more hand labor actually, larger row spacings, 72-inch rows, 72-inch plants. And your goal is large, big trees, to try to get a decent yield or larger yield per pound per tree, versus this field right here was planted in the probably 15 pound per acre range. The seed count on this is roughly 40,000 seeds per acre. So you can see the density of this crop is much higher than what you would normally see in a CBD field. But each one of these plants, when we look at the size of some of these colas and buds on these things, your yield per acre here is actually higher than what you would have in most horticultural style setups. And then the big thing is the reduced labor. If you look closely in these videos, you'll see males in here. We've had to contend with pollination. There's feral hemp around here now, volunteer hemp, and there's grain operations, hemp grain operations here. So rather than fight that battle of trying to keep all the pollen away, we just made equipment to take the seeds out of the buds and then still preserve the CBD content. Pollination we don't see in the test results of these large farms here. Where we see big degradation, where we see the improvements, is when we clean the seed out, take the stem pieces out, take all those small little 1/4 inch pieces, 1/2 inch pieces of stalk out. CBD content actually goes up, even though it's been pollinated. So remember, CBD is percent by weight. So if you reduce the stuff in the mix that does not contribute oil to the tonnage, then your CBD content can go up. So it's something to think about. How can you manipulate that little bit of math there to be successful? Today's price point of between 65, 75 cents per point. You just have to be really aware of your input cost. If you can grow this crop here was grown for probably less than $1,500 an acre, and the overall gross return per acre right now at 72 cents is about $6,600 an acre. So if you've got $1,500 into it, you're in pretty good shape. If you've got $10,000 or $20,000 an acre into your production cost, then you're in trouble a little bit. So it's something to think about looking at these direct seeding deals. The high grade seeds got seed that you can direct plant and seed like this and reduce your input cost. We've been constantly innovating equipment at Formation Ag. The grasshopper machines that we have are a vacuum bud collection cart, where you run a clean strip on the front of the machine, and then we vacuum out of that head into the grasshopper cart. It takes the buds whole. If there's any dust, if there's any loose trichomes, what have you, that vacuum collects it. It goes into a large hopper that has an air dispersal filtration system on the top of it, so that you can capture all that. Then you've got one person in the field harvesting. You don't have a whole crew. It'll run between 6 and 10 acres an hour harvesting. It does lend itself to be 24-inch row spacings or less. This crop right here is 6.5-inch row spacings. Then those machines can really shine, because you're just leaving all the stalk in the field and just taking the buds. The oil yielding part of the flower is what you're really interested as a hemp farmer. Just happens to grow on a hemp plant, but you need to get those buds off of there, get them dried, get them cleaned up, and that's how you can turn that into revenue. So it's something to think about. There's videos on our LinkedIn page and on my YouTube page for Formation Ag and LinkedIn, Corbett Hefner. You can see that. We post videos all the time during harvest, so you can see these different techniques that we're evolving. The next generation is we're going to continue working with these bud stripping type machines and improving the grasshopper machines, even though we're pretty happy with them now. Always room for improvement. We make a list every year of things we want to work on and improve that over the winter and start building the next generation of equipment. Drying is the next thing that seems to be a bottleneck. That's where the push to get into larger scale farming, that's one of the bottlenecks, is drying. So I know there's a lot of companies working on larger scale drying that don't damage the trichomes, hurt the seed. You think you can only get up to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit before you start to toast the seed. So if you want to keep your seed viable, you need to be aware of that. CBD, the common knowledge is in that 100, 110 range. Before you start carboxylating the CBD oil. So that's something to be aware of. I'd like to see some more studies on that personally, just to see what that true effect is, but that's coming along. Drying is going to be the next bottleneck that people have to work on. We've been experimenting with some of that as we go along. We've done some small prototyping things that seem to work pretty decent, and then trying to figure out how to scale those up to keep up with our harvesters, because we've kind of solved the problem of getting through a large field quickly, but that drying portion is the next thing that's got to be solved. We've been building decordicators and fiber equipment since 2015. We built the first decorticator that we know of in the United States since the early 1900s. So we've focused on fiber and grain production since the word go. Our decordicators, we've got two different systems that we're building. We have the FiberTrack 660, which is an up to a ton an hour machine that produces long line fiber, really clean herd. We can size and clean the herd. We can get the dust out of the herd. So if you're interested in animal bedding, for instance, the animals don't want that little bit of fiber. They really don't want the dust in there. So we've developed some techniques to get that product really clean. Fiber, long line fiber. You can always cut something down. You can't make it any longer. So we've focused on long line. You know, if you feed this stock into this decorticator, it's 5 feet long, 6 feet long. We can get a 5 to 6 foot long piece of fiber out of it. Pretty clean. We can get in the 90 to 95% clean category. One thing to remember, that a Christmas tree type CBD plant does not mean you have a really good fiber plant by any means, or a very good herd plant. The fiber is kind of large. Every place there's a node in that Christmas tree, you've got a kind of a weak spot in the fiber, so that's something to be aware of. The herd is a little large and chunky. I'm not sure if that's desirable for animal bedding. And when we break that stuff down, most of those pieces we size for most customers. We do some toll decortication for people to help launch businesses. We don't want to be in the decortication service, but we're doing some of that work to continue the industry forward. So we size most of the herd between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch for the bedding and hempcrete market, maybe a little bit longer if you're a true hempcrete. Then the smaller byproducts, the 1/4 inch and less pieces, are being used for absorptive media stuff, floor dry, kitty litter, things along that nature. So that's another big push and piece of equipment that we've worked on to help large-scale farming. Because if you're interested in tri-cropping, you know, trying to get the more revenue sources, like this CBD field I'm standing in here, when we strip the buds off of it, this field will get swathed. They'll let it ret for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they'll come through and bale it. And then we've been decorticating this product for this customer so that they can sell these products in the retail and make some extra revenue in addition to the CBD that they farm.
For another look at what equipment companies are doing to evolve with the hemp industry, let's go to Blake Sandness with HPS.
For farmers to successfully grow and harvest hemp for high CBD, they need a way to be able to till and prepare the ground, a way to plant the seeds or transplants, a mechanical way to control the weeds, and a mechanical way to also harvest and separate the biomass for the next processes. Regions that are well suited to grow hemp are specific to the type and use of the crop. Farmers that were successful in 2019 growing high CBD had the experience and knowledge from other crops such as vegetables, tobaccos, and light crops because of their experience using specialized equipment, access to labor, and understanding of the region of which to grow it in. The likely next evolution within the hemp industry, specifically related to farming and practices, is a mobile piece of equipment that can not only cut down whole wet plants, but also shuck and separate that plant wet, so then it can be separated into the flower, fiber, and seed and gone directly into the drying process. Hemp Processing Solution is continuing to develop its original products, like the biomass and the bud rubber, to be able to accept and account for the uncontrollable variables such as moisture, plant type, size, and region in which the product will be grown in.
Thank you for joining us on Hemp Forward as we've taken a look at the steps in what may be America's next great farm frontier.